So Israel and Palestinians promised to reduce violence next month, a month of holy religious meaning. What do you make of this? To answer this question, I'm here with former Labour MP Ivan Nurse and Conservative councillor David Meehan. Ivan, what do you make of this?
Well, I hope it's genuine from the Palestinian side. I mean, we've seen some horrendous terrorist attacks on innocent Israelis in the last few weeks. Week after week, we've seen growth in the violence. There has to be zero tolerance. There is no excuse. You sometimes hear media and the world justifying that, the Palestinians are in a very bad place and therefore somehow terrorism against innocent civilians is justified. It is totally without justification. And the Israelis are right to be as tough as possible on terrorism. Make no mistake, any society that deals with terrorism of this type would have to be tough. So let's be clear. That's the first thing I would say to you. Of course, I hope there is going to be a significant reduction in aggression as a consequence of an important month ahead. But let's be honest about this. The trouble is that we have no progress on the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians. At the end of the day, we have massive progress in terms of the Abraham Accords. And this is so crucial for stability in the region. It's so crucial for the fight against Iran. We've been speaking a lot about Ukraine. Okay, make no mistake about it. The next serious problem in the world is Iran's determination to develop a nuclear capacity and the fact that Israel under no circumstances can allow that to happen. So the Abraham Accords are absolutely vital in that context in terms of uniting against the threat of Iran. However, is that enough without progress on the Palestinian front? Now there is a view in Israel, a very strong view, that really we can maintain the status quo in terms of the relationship with the Palestinians. And I have a slightly different view. So my view is this: you cannot do business with a terrorist organisation like Hamas. They are committed to the destruction of the state of Israel. It is very difficult to do business with Fatah because Abbas is incredibly weak and really doesn't have the strength to make the compromises that are necessary for any sort of political or diplomatic progress. So those are the challenges in the real world that we face, plus the fact that we have an Israeli government who has elements in it, who in the past have said things which have been incredibly divisive and unhelpful in terms of relationship, never mind with the Palestinians, but with the Arab community in Israel as well. So that's the landscape. However, what we have is a situation, in my view, where we need to find a way of getting more economic growth and job opportunities and investment for the ordinary Palestinian people. And we have to find a way of doing that so they have a sense of hope. Now, how you do that and deal with the leadership challenges that Israel faces in terms of the Palestinian side is easier said than done. But what I am advocating is that the idea that we can just sit back and say the status quo is acceptable because most of the Arab world no longer cares about the Palestinians, because their leadership is so rotten, which it is in many, many ways, okay, that Israel should just sort of sit back and not do anything to change anything, I don't think is the right strategy. I think we have to work with others, with the Arab League, with the Gulf states who are now Israel's allies. Okay, we have to try and find a way of getting some investment and economic progress and progress in the everyday lives of ordinary Palestinians moving. Okay. Yeah. The detail of that has to be worked out. And at the moment, there's not going to be a two-state solution. So the world can say what it wants about a two-state solution. Unfortunately, there is not the will on either side to make that possible. It's just not possible, okay? So let's not talk in grand steps about two-state solutions, okay? But in terms of improving the everyday lives of ordinary Palestinians and getting the economy and investment moving and commerce moving, it's very, very important. So I would urge even this Israeli government, people might sort of regard it as a strange thing to do, to look at that and see what can be done, okay, to give ordinary Palestinians some level of hope. Now that doesn't mean, by the way, that the lack of progress justifies the violence and the terrorism, because it doesn't. And it gets me very angry when I hear people say, well, because of the way the Palestinians treated their lives, they live, that justifies them trying to blow other people up. I'm afraid to say nothing justifies one trying to blow other people up. And the incitement that goes on through their leadership, we know Iran is funding Hamas, Iran is funding probably some internal violence within Israel as well. So this is the delicate balance. No, zero tolerance for terrorism, no acceptance of legitimisation and justification of terrorism, but equally simply saying, well, actually, there isn't much pressure anymore to do anything about the Palestinian, so the status quo is fine. I don't agree with that.
David, what do you think?
So I think that the solution here is that obviously if both sides are saying that they're going to have good relations and the like, well, of course we welcome that, but where I see it coming from, I can't really see that, especially on the Palestinian side. I think in a way we have a situation where in Israel we have possibly too much democracy, where we have elections and we have proportional representation. It's a good example of why not to have proportional representation, yeah. And then we have no democracy, or we have the likes of Hamas who are trying to take out Fatah and look for dominance in the area of the other side of the Jordan, okay, and. I think, but if you look at what the Abraham Accords have been significantly an amazing agreement that's helped bring Israel into the more intimate Arab world. Ivan mentions the Arab League. I think the Arab League is dead in the water. It was set up by Syria. Syria is a disastrous place. Lebanon's a disastrous place. I think that internationally, we need to put more. I think locally as well, the US have seen the manoeuvring of Iran, and I think they've changed their approach on Iran with trying to maybe cut a deal and lighten sanctions on Iran. I think everyone again has seen exactly what Iran are and what they're about, and the pressure still needs to be kept onto Iran. Also, in a way, with Putin and his his restrictions on fuel has then made us look towards the Middle East a bit more for our fuel security. So now we're looking to probably make partnerships again with Arab states for our fuel security in future, which I think gives us more leverage as well to help bring about pressure on the Palestinians to understand that if they want to be part of the world community, trading properly and peacefully with its closest neighbours, like the way Israel has good peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan, that's the only way that's what we should promote. I know people we make comparisons with home, but in Ireland, we didn't ban Sinn Féin. We banned their prescribed terrorist organisation, the IRA, but we told them there was a political way forward, and I think that can be done to a degree with certain Palestinian organisations. I'm not saying Hamas or Hezbollah or something like that should be illegal whatsoever. I also see what happened to Israel recently at the African Union summit, and they were asked to leave.
But they said that was because they sent the wrong person in.
Well, I think they could have been treated a bit more in a bit more hospitable way, and I think there was certain elements in some people in the African Union that need to look at that. South Africa is an example of that, and I think that this is where the West again could put pressure, economic incentives and dividends to help show that there, and I'll quote Tony Blair, there is a peace dividend if you encourage people to really get on. And from an economic point, well, people want jobs, they want prosperity, they want to go to university, they want to move and have free travel and all those things. That's a universal thing that everyone wants in the world. So people need to have hope. They need to feel they don't want to feel disenfranchised. We live in a world where everyone's beginning to feel disenfranchised.
We're talking about specifically in Israel now.
In the world as well, but I think if you're a Palestinian or if you're someone who lives in Tel Aviv and you can't get housing or something like that, you'll feel disenfranchised and you won't vote for Likud or maybe some of the other parties and you end up with extreme kind of elements in politics. The best politics is in the middle ground, and but from but a solid message has to be always given to terrorism that it doesn't pay. We have to, and the world community has to always stick with those rules. We live in a world-based society. We cannot indulge terrorism.
Agreed.
The European Union has indulged Palestinian terrorism for far too long.
You want to
Well, I just want to comment. I mean, you know, the Israelis and many of the African countries have started to develop really close relationships.
Yeah.
The Israelis attend the African Union summit. The big powers, I think mainly South Africa, said, you know, we're going to chuck Israel out, and these other countries say nothing. They allow that to happen. These are the countries that have established diplomatic relations with Israel, are trading with Israel, are heralding that trade, are championing it, as the Israelis are, actually, with many African countries. Bibi Netanyahu made it a strategic priority for Israel. It's shocking that the Israeli representative was chucked out of that conference.
Shocking.
And it's singling Israel out again. And when Israel is singled out, I'm afraid, it is anti-Semitism. When it's singled out and demonised in that way and delegitimised by... I mean, how many other representatives of countries were kicked out publicly of the African Union Summit? None is
Nobody
the
else.
Okay, so it's
but
not
they,
acceptable.
they say it's particularly about they sent the wrong person.
I don't
you
care
don't
what
think?
they say. I don't
That's
care
just
what
an
they say.
excuse. That's a load
That's
of
nonsense. So
baloney.
look, the issue is this: for Jews in the diaspora as well to have a view, even though many Israelis say it's none of our business, which I always find interesting. Okay, is it simply acceptable to say the Palestinians are no longer a priority for the world? They're no longer a priority, it appears, for much of the Arab world. Okay, so the status quo is acceptable. We don't need to do anything. Okay, my view is if people don't have any hope, that is not good for anybody. Okay, and that's why I'm talking about focusing on economic investment, business growth, opportunities for young people, and finding ways of making that happen, despite Hamas and to some extent despite Fatah. I also think, I spoke to a very top Israeli security person recently, who said that during the Oslo Accords he was totally opposed to doing business with Arafat, because he said Arafat was a terrorist, always a terrorist, and was never going to change. So he didn't agree with the Israeli leadership's, the elite's belief that you could do business with him. But when it comes to Abbas, he doesn't say he's a nice guy. I mean, this is the Holocaust tonight, okay? But he says he's totally committed to non-violence. And therefore, we should be actually encouraging and rewarding those on the Palestinian side who are committed to non-violence. Because if we don't do that, they are going to be replaced in their entirety by leaders who are committed 100% to violence. So these issues are not as straightforward as they appear. I often hear people from their armchairs in Broughton Park and Sedgley Park saying, oh, we want these tough policies and this tough rhetoric, don't give them anything. Look, as I say, I'm not at this moment in time, there is not the environment for a two-state solution. So I'm not talking about statehood, right? Let's be clear about that. There is not the environment for that to happen under any circumstances. I'm talking about the ordinary Palestinians in their everyday lives having no hope. That is not good, right? And that's why the Israeli government has got to find a way, working with the international community and their new allies in the Gulf states, right, who have infinite amounts of money, let's be honest, of getting some, not traditional aid, which actually doesn't make a difference, and by the way has been used to encourage terrorists and pay terrorists and pay their families, which is scandalous, but that's another issue we can touch on another time. I'm talking about genuine economic investment, getting the economy moving, getting jobs, getting hope for young people. And I think the Israeli government has a duty to work with the international community and the Gulf states to make that happen.